Hey guys, you want to get rolling?
She's going back. She's there till July.
How's everybody doing on this gross day? 2 days in a row where I almost couldn't get out of bed because I looked out, I opened the blinds and looked out and I just thought, today could be an off day. Thank you guys for coming once again, obviously. I appreciate it as always. We're gonna start tackling a few things here in a minute. But first, I wanted to talk. So far, I've gotten 5 people that sent me a draft of their videos. Honestly, I had no idea if I'd get 1 or 40, but 5 is good. And I know that many of you are working on stuff. That's great. Some of you, going through this process, have decided what to do, but you know that it's a long-term project. Dixie was talking about doing a sort of a promo for her school for potential families moving in, that type of thing. That's awesome. That's a long-term thing. That's fine. You know, the key is working through and playing with it, and until you get to get your skills sharpened up a little bit. So we might check out 1 or 2 of the videos that have been sent to me so far. They're really cool. And I've already asked permission from Rebecca Brooks if I could show hers today. It might be a really cool way to start the day. Are you going to do you want to go outside?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I would love to start the day with showing Miss Brooks. So that's what we'll do. If I can get it to pull up. Earlier we had problems. All right, you guys want to start by checking out this 1-minute film that Rebecca Brooks did. It's called Autumn. Wait, is that Mr. Mathis's audio? I see what's going on here. Okay, hold on. I'm going to figure it out. Okay. All right, here we go. This is Autumn.
Is this not a true autumn day? Just the still melancholy that I love. It makes life and nature harmonize. The birds are consulting about their migrations. The trees are putting on the hectic or the pallid hues of decay and begin to strew the ground, that one's very footsteps may not disturb the repose of earth and air, while they give us a scent that is a perfect anodyne to the restless spirit. Delicious autumn, my very soul is wedded to it. And if I were a bird, I would fly about the earth, seeking the successive autumns.
So that was Autumn, yeah. It's really, really beautiful. I mean, job well done. Let's start by, are you cool with fielding a few questions? Okay, let's talk about it. What's the first thing you guys noticed or appreciated or enjoyed, or what questions do you have about that?
The music and the voice.
Uh-huh.
The audio together.
Okay, so how did she pull that off? You want to answer that?
I just, and I don't know if the audio has to be this way, but I put it on top. I don't know if that's.
You put audio wherever you want.
Okay, so even
Yeah.
no matter what. But,
Mhm.
I just uploaded my song through iTunes first, cut it where I wanted it to, and then actually I was able to move my, what's the up and down line?
The playhead.
The playhead. I was able to move the playhead wherever I wanted to start recording, and I recorded from there, and then I could move it around from there. So I was able to put my audio wherever I wanted.
So you went to Window, record a voiceover,
Yes.
and then just hit record. You counted 3, 2, 1, and you started talking. Did you use the built-in mic on your laptop?
I did.
Cool. You also used a noise reduction effect of some sort on your voice, I think. Like I hear like something going on there. Did you click anything to do that?
I did.
Okay, interesting. The voice is intelligible. You know, you can hear it. It's pretty crisp and stuff. But you can tell how having an external mic would be a benefit. You know, not that it had much of an effect here because the video has a great effect and it's beautiful. But that would help. An external mic would help for sure. So yeah, you can place audio vertically above or below anything, and all audio, whether it's included in video clips or if it's audio by itself, all that audio will get blended together,
And
no
just
matter
like
what.
Mr. Witt had showed us, I just turned all the volume down in every single video clip. I just stopped.
You pull that line all the way to the bottom. Negative infinity is the same thing as off for audio. It's like an electrical concept. That's why negative infinity, that's why it says that when you pull it all the way down. Really good cinematography. What camera did you use?
A Canon, and I can't tell you the exact.
We use a DSLR, right? Yeah, I can tell. A DSLR is like it's like a legit camera with a lens. You know what I mean? It wasn't filmed with a phone, huh? Yeah, all modern DSLRs shoot video, and it shoots beautiful video too. I can tell she used a DSLR because of the depth of field. I can tell that certain things that she has chosen are in focus, and other things in the background are out of focus, and that's what gives it that cinematic look. And it was a pretty cinematic video that you've turned in. It's awesome in that way. And my students at James Clemens are always looking to get that look. And when we started investing in DSLRs instead of like consumer camcorders is when we started getting that look. The reason is consumer camcorders are designed for like home video shooting, and you want everything to be in focus because you don't want to miss that your kid says that funny thing or whatever. And so they design them for like the widest depth of field possible, or the widest focal range possible. But DSLRs have really cool interchangeable lenses, and you can get that look. I can even get it to where like this water bottle right here in front of Stephen is in focus while his phone is out of focus. Like I can get that shallow of a depth of field. It's really cool. So anything else? Any other questions for her? Yeah.
I was just curious when you were saying that about the lens. Were you manually focusing, and what kind of lens did you use?
It's the boyfriend's camera, or the fiance's camera, so I don't know.
If I had
I
to,
don't know all the details, but I play around with it a lot. I'm not sure.
if it's a Canon and it's probably a stock lens that came, unless he's like a super photographer.
He's got another lens.
Okay, who knows then? Lens, honestly, if you want to get really deep into making cinematic looking footage, a DSLR with a good lens will make or break the look of your film. And the more expensive a lens, typically the more beautiful it looks. A lot of times money doesn't directly translate to beauty, but in this particular case, it kind of does. So that's something to note about that. That's how her video looks different from many of the other ones that I saw. Any other questions for Rebecca?
Did you do your voice last?
I did.
Cool. And I think now when you hit record voiceover, it mutes everything else. Used to, when you would hit record voiceover, the audio would still be playing out the speakers of your Mac. And then finally, I think they figured out why would you ever want that? Because it would be feeding back into the microphone, you know? But I think that's now no longer a thing, right? Auto mutes everything while you're recording, so that's good. So let's start. We're going to start by looking at this sheet, and I'm going to work through some of these concepts. And I got one of these things so that I could actually, I needed a board. Let's talk about frame rate for a second. Does anybody know what frame rate is? Frames per second, yeah. So just to clarify, video is nothing more than pictures happening really fast, like a flip book. You know, I remember the first time I ever saw that was at the Disney store when I was a kid. And that's all video is. And so frame rate is really important sometimes. Right now, there are two main types of frame rates. We have 24 frames per second, and then we have 30. Your iPhones, iPads, everything else are shooting at 30, and traditional film cameras, like high-end Hollywood cameras, are shooting at 24 frames per second. This is cinema standard, the 24 frames per second. The 30 is broadcast standard, like news, documentary, that type of stuff. So you'll see 24 FPS and you'll see 30 FPS if you have a DSLR camera, or if you have that camera back there. You can change it. 24 frames per second is really friendly. It looks, there's a little more motion blur, and it's part of that thing that we experience as cinema. We like 24 frames per second. It's the lowest number of pictures per second to provide us the illusion that there's a moving image on the screen. It's the lowest that's acceptable, and we like the way it looks. And film cameras, the actual like rolling cameras, that's how fast they're going, 24 pictures per second. 30 frames per second looks more realistic, but we don't really like realism when we go to the cinema. You know, we like it to look a little different and a little otherworldly, and we appreciate that. So those are the two standards, but there's something really important here. When you go higher than this, like 60 and up, is when you're shooting slow-mo. Technically, if you shoot video with your iPhone and then you slow it down in Final Cut, which I'm going to show you how to do today, it's called retime. If you slow down 30 frames per second video, it becomes choppy. So whereas your brain used to see that as like fluid motion on a screen, when you slow it down, like to say halftime, that's really 15 frames per second. You know what I mean? And so when you slow it down that slow, your brain can start to see the pictures. So it looks choppy, it looks jumpy, which is an effect that some people use. Like I see that a lot in like skateboarding videos where they'll slow it down where it's choppy on purpose. But for the most part, when you slow it down, you still want it to look fluid. Does that make sense? So if I shoot at 60 frames a second and then slow it down to halftime, it's still 30 frames a second, which my brain perceives as fluid motion. So that's sort of what slow motion video is. If you take out your iPhone 6 or higher right now and put the camera on slow-mo, it's going to shoot at 60, I think. I think you can change that setting to 120. If you get it all the way up to 120, it's going to take up a lot of data on your phone, but man, you can slow that down to 25% and it looks perfectly fluid. And that's how they pull that off. So it's important to know that stuff. A lot of times, Final Cut bases your project on the first clip that you pull in. So if you pull in a 30 frames per second video off your iPad into Final Cut, and that's the first clip you drag into your project, it's going to make that entire project 30 frames per second. But if you pull in a still image, it doesn't know what frame rate you want your project to be in, and so it's going to pop up and say, what frame rate do you want the session to be in? Some of you may have experienced that already. And so I would recommend 30 as the baseline. You probably want to just go with 30 across the board. Unless you're doing something that's more in the cinema domain, your video would look beautiful in 24, but the truth is I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The difference between 24 and 30 frames per second is so negligible to the standard human eye, like maybe Spielberg could figure out that that's what you were shooting with or whatever. So any questions about frame rate? Just want to try to get as much info into your brain as possible. You're going to have to use this information at some point to make some decisions. So there's that. And now aspect ratio. Does anybody know what the aspect ratio of HD video is? Say it again. 1080p. 1080p is kind of like modern HD video. The aspect ratio is 16:9. You probably heard that before. All that has to do with is this times this is always 16:9. So if you bought a television and the top and bottom were 32 inches, then this side would be 18. It just keeps that ratio. So HD, or 16:9, is only really talking about the size and shape or dimensions of that rectangle. That's what that is. When you go to the cinema, though, when you go to the actual movie theater, it's actually more like this. It's like a panoramic or anamorphic widescreen is what that's called. And I think it's like 23:7 or something. It's really wide. That's because those cameras shoot like that and they can see like giant expansive, whatever in the lens. and they want to keep that, and then they build the movie theaters to kind of match that. But for us, we're shooting at 16 by 9, and it's going to stay that way. If you're shooting in HD on an iPhone or an iPad, you're shooting 1080p video. This right here is 1920 pixels, and I'm not going to like drive you nuts with numbers today. This right here is 1920 pixels, and this side right here is 1080, which is where 1080 comes from. And so this by this is 16 by 9. If you were to reduce that down, that's 16 by 9. So that's what those numbers mean. That's going to matter to you eventually. And it matters because if you take an old iPhone 4 and you shoot video, you're going to be at 720p, which is a lower resolution than this. But then if you shoot video on an iPhone 6 and it's got 1080p video and you try to blend them together, you're going to have to make some decisions. Do I want this whole project to be 1080 to get the highest quality out of it? Or do I want it to be 720, which will force me to like downgrade the quality of my good footage? Does that make sense? So you got to pick one or the other. And so you just need to know like what those two numbers mean. 720p is what HD was when it first came out like 12 years ago. 1080p came out like 5 years ago. And now we're at 4K. Like you can buy 4K televisions. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And some, I think the next iPhone is going to shoot at 4K. It does shoot at 4K. So I mean, it's growing and growing and growing. But just know, all of that is still a 16 by 9 rectangle. So that's aspect ratio. Any questions about that? Compression. Compression happens at the end. So you know when you shoot, like, let's say that Ms. Brooks, her 1 minute video that we just saw. If she shot that at 1080p and it was 1 minute long, it was maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 megabytes or something. I don't know how big your video was, but let's say it was 400 megabytes. But then somebody said, which, are any of you going for the national board thing this year? So this is going to matter to you guys for sure. Your file uploads for your video of you teaching, it has to be no more than 300 megabytes. So you're going to have to compress your video somehow. There are lots of ways to compress it, but it always happens at the end. You don't want to shoot low quality footage, you know, like actually shoot low quality on a camera just to get a lower file size. That's not a good practice. You want to shoot at the highest quality possible and then compress it at the end after you've done all your awesome effects and transitions and put the video together, then you can compress it. So there are a lot of ways to compress video. One is, I want to show you 2 ways today. And I could compress Ms. Brooks' video down to a 4 megabyte movie and email it to someone. You know what I mean? It's going to look like crap, but I could do that. It's going to look really pixelated, and you're going to see the pixels in the video. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. The first way is if I have a movie. I should have a movie in here, you would think. Believe it or not, I don't know if I do. I'll show you in Final Cut. One way to compress your video is in Final Cut. When you click share, there is a way to compress it on its way out. Sorry, should have already had this pulled up. So here's a video, what gets hit. When I click share right here on the right, if I choose master file, then I have an opportunity to compress my video on the share stage right as it's going out. So I'm going to click settings at the top. Right now down here, you can see it says 165 megabytes. If I know I need it lower than that, then I'm going to go to settings. And I'm going to look at the resolution, and you can see 1920 by 1080. That's this rectangle I was talking about. That means it's like 1080p. If I click that, I can decrease my 16 by 9 ratio a number of steps. So if I click this one, it's going to reflect a new file size. This one's 50 megabytes now. So if you're looking to get a more manageable file, I'll give you an example of when this is going to come in handy. Like right now, I'm shooting 2 hours of HD video back there. So when I get this If I were to export it at full resolution, it would be like 20 gigabytes big. That's really big, and it would take all night to upload to YouTube, which actually I'm going to do because I have all night. But if I don't have all night, I would pull it into Final Cut and share it out with these settings, and it's going to spit out a video that's like 1/4 of that file size. It's a lot more manageable. So that's one way to compress a video. I'll show you the other way really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and share this video out. It shouldn't take but a second. And you guys know where the progress meter is, right? Have I shown you this? Right here in the middle? Well, the percentage of progress is right there in the center. There's a circle and it says 0% or 100%. When you're sharing something, it tells you how far along it is. So, all right, so here's the video. WhatGetsHit.mov. If you have a video already in Finder that you've already shared or rendered out of Final Cut, if you right-click it and say compress, nope, don't do that. That's going to make a zip file of it. Go to encode selected video files. Every Mac can do this. It's going to pull this up and say, okay, how much do you want to compress it? And it's going to give you some options. So that's another way to compress your video. If you have a video that's way too big, which may happen. Part of my job at James Clemens was to film the faculty meetings, which could be up to like an hour, hour and 20 minutes sometimes. So those videos, I would do this. I would pull them onto my Mac, right-click, encode them, and compress them, and then upload them to MediaCast in like, 1 minute instead of 1 hour. So that's how I could get them out really quickly. So that's how you compress videos. Compression, all compression does is reduce the quality of your video to save you data space. That's all compression is. Any questions about compression? Sorry, the whole first half of this thing today is going to be like me just talking concepts at you. The last one, video formats. Have you seen AVI as a file type before? Anybody ever seen AVI? If you did, you saw it on a Windows PC. We need to avoid AVI moving forward. Like the world needs to avoid AVI moving forward. That's because we only should be interested in formats that any computer or any mobile device could play. And AVI just simply will not play on an Apple device. It's the same with WMV. You know what a WMV is, I'm sure. It's a Windows Media Video, I think is what it stands for. Those things are fine for a Windows machine, but the second you email it to me, I can't view it. You could upload it to YouTube, and then I could view it, because YouTube converts it. But we want to try to avoid AVI, and we want to try to avoid WMV. The formats that are universal, or I should say file types that are universal, are typically QuickTime formats. MOV is a solid universal file type. MP4 is another one, and so is M4V. And all three of these you have seen or will see if you use iMovie or Final Cut. The cool thing about these is if you email them or send them to anybody on a Windows PC, they're automatically going to be able to play them. So these are kind of the three universal file types that I would recommend using. Any others you want to try to avoid, if at all possible. If you need, like let's say a teacher sends you a WMV file and says, hey, could you use this in that thing you're editing? You can always convert it first and then pull it into Final Cut, but you're not going to be able to pull it into Final Cut. So if you ever have to do that, there are some free programs online to convert video from any type to any other type. My favorite, if you want to go ahead and get it, it's called MPEG Stream Clip. It's free. It allows you to convert any movie type to any other movie type. And it's free and awesome. And it works really fast. So that is video formats. Any questions or anomalies that you've encountered with video formats? All three of these are considered QuickTime formats, which is technically an Apple thing. But I'm sure you've seen QuickTime is also part of the PC environment too, but Apple originally invented it. Okay, cool. Let's switch gears to cameras and stuff. Anybody in here besides Miss Brooks have a DSLR at home? Yeah? If you've never shot video with a DSLR, it's so fun. If you set it on manual focus and you just go around, and if you know like basics about, basics of aperture and that type of stuff, shooting in manual focus mode is so fun, and you can adjust things. One thing I noticed about your video, which I love a lot, is when I first saw something, it would be out of focus, and then within about half a second, it would come into focus. You pulled it into focus every time. That's a really cool trick, but it can't be done with an iPhone. There's just no way to do it. The iPhone's focal range is so deep that every single one of your faces would be perfectly in focus on an iPhone. So if you're looking for that, that's what you want to do. The middle ground is a consumer camcorder, which many of us have in our schools. What I'm thinking I want to try to do is get one camcorder and one wireless lapel mic for every school, and just give it to one of you guys, one of the content creators at the school, and you could be like home base. And if any of your content creators needed it in your school, they could just come by and grab it. Because one thing that the biggest problem you're gonna have is audio. And we've gotta fix that problem. There are some other workarounds, and we'll talk about that in a second regarding audio. So, did you shoot your whole video handheld?
Yes.
And Steven, did you shoot your whole video handheld? Yep. Who else sent it to me? Brewer, did you shoot your whole video handheld? Like holding the phone or whatever? Or did you put it on some sort of tripod or something?
I can't lie, I didn't shoot any of it.
Okay, cool. What about you, Miss Wilson?
I had kids.
Oh, yours was a slideshow. Yeah. And somebody else sent it to me. I can't remember. Oh yeah, Congo. Was yours was handheld. It was the classroom. Yeah. So handheld footage, can be awesome. But 9 times out of 10, and especially when you're like roving around looking at pumpkins and leaves, like hold that camera in your hands by all means.
Well, try to focus too. You really can't.
Yeah. So let's talk about stabilization. Obviously, there's a place for handheld. I mean, I shoot handheld all the time. You guys will shoot handheld all the time. It's fine. But the truth is, if what you're trying to do is film something for information, not for artistic purposes, the camera moving around, whether you think you're stable or not, the camera moving is distracting, and the audience automatically starts paying attention to the camera, not the content. And so stabilizing your camera in some way becomes really important. The obvious choice is a tripod. That camera back there is on a standard, it's like a $100 tripod. It's a good one. Any camera could go on that, a still camera, a DSLR. There's a tripod mount for an iPhone. There's a tripod mount for an iPad. There's also those iClip things, iClip with a K. Those things are phenomenal. That's what we used to shoot I'm Human at Liberty like 4 or 5 years ago. It was just a microphone stand that I jacked from the auditorium or somewhere, and then I put the iClip on it, and I just put the iPad on there, and I rotated it until it was just right. And now I've got a tripod for my iPad. That allowed us to really focus on the people, the looks on their faces, and think less about camera and more about what story are we trying to tell. So stabilizing your camera is uber important, and it has its place to do it handheld, but for the most part, you're gonna wanna stabilize your camera somehow. When you shoot handheld, if I'm holding, I should have brought let's say this is a camcorder. Here's the lens and here's the back of it, right? If I hold it like this, which is how the manufacturer designs it, right? You put your hand up through that little thing and you hold it like this. My hand will shake and so will yours. I will probably shake more than you because I drink too much coffee, but the way the manufacturer designs it is actually like the worst way that you could hold it. There's no way that you can stabilize that. It's gonna move. So what people do, if they do go handheld, they cradle it like this and they put their other hand and they lock their elbows. And they shoot footage like this, and it allows you to get that roving handheld feel, but it's almost perfectly smooth. So if you want to go handheld with an iPhone, there's, that cradle thing is not going to be quite as easy. But what I would do is I would use both hands. That other hand is going to stabilize it and keep those small, the minuscule vibrations down to a minimum. And then I'm going to go around and shoot video like this. So using 2 hands and locking your elbows, as silly as it sounds, can make or break the look or the fluidity of handheld footage. Any questions about that? really cool stuff that you can get is a shoulder mount. If anybody's interested in getting a little more sophisticated with cinematography, shoulder mount that leans here, has handlebars here. You may have seen some of our students floating around with these things. You mount the camera here, and now you're just walking and you're shooting video, and it's perfectly fluid because you're stabilized. That third point is what stabilizes it, you know? So that's what newscasters have. They have some kind of shoulder mount when they shoot like this, and it's over their shoulder. Those things are really cool. You can get one on Amazon for 50 or 60 bucks that works really well. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, shoot me an email. That's the main thing about stabilization. Let's talk about composition. I think I made reference to this the first time around. Only you can stop vertical filming. And somebody needs to make a PSA about this. Everybody in the world, because of the mobile technology that we now hold so dear, shoots video like this. Everybody. My wife does it. I'm like, hey, you know. She's like, well, I can fit more in the frame. And I'm like, oh, can you? Let's talk about that. And then she gets mad at me. Here's the thing. This is a 16 by 9 rectangle. This is your iPhone right here. YouTube doesn't have a 16 by 9 rectangle that's vertical that you can play through. And even if they did, it's still going to have to be displayed on a television or a projector or whatever. So really what you've got here, it looks like it's a third, but it's not. It's actually between 1/3 and 1/4. So you've lost almost 70 or over 70% of your screen real estate. So and my wife will say, well, I want to shoot from head to toe, and it's easier this way. What's the answer there? If she wants to film me head to toe, back up, man. Yeah, back it up. Turn it 90 degrees and then back up, and now you're shooting me head to toe. And I am the same size on that screen. Whether you shoot like this or like this, I'm still going to be the same size because the television screen is only that size. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is there is almost no reason to ever shoot video vertically. I've seen it done artistically in really cool ways. One was in an October Project video last year where they wanted it to look like a selfie situation. They were like it was a point of view situation, and it was like a girl putting on her lipstick or whatever, and it was vertical, and it was so sweet, like it worked, you know. If you're doing something reality based like that, sure, but by and large, we gotta stop that, and we gotta like preach that to our teachers in our schools too. If we're trying to make content that's easy to digest, that's shareable, we gotta convince people in our buildings to stop shooting like that and start shooting like this. So another thing to think about here, and some of you, if you're an art teacher or if you've been in digital media in some way, you know about the rule of thirds. Does anybody want to talk about the rule of thirds and what it means? It's not a rule at all. It's just called a rule of thirds. Yeah? Yeah, it has something to do with vertical and horizontal.
I mean, what you were saying before, when we film with our iPad, we hold it.
This is more about composition, like where do you place the talent in your video screen? Or where do you place the actors or the people talking or whatever?
Yeah, but for what, don't go to the third rule.
Okay.
Go back.
Okay.
You want everybody
Oh.
to hold.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody should be filming horizontally like this.
Even on whatever.
Anything.
Okay.
Anything.
Sorry.
All digital cameras on Earth right now are designed to shoot 16 by 9 horizontally. And we have just sort of adapted that because of how we hold our phones. But that's the only reason we've adapted it that way or evolved in that direction. We got to kind of undo that. That's cool.
Make sure.
Robin, you want to talk about the rule of thirds?
Well, I don't know the psychology of it, but it's something about it's more pleasing to the eye and acceptable when something is not exactly centered, but they're
Yeah.
taking that the vertical lines and dividing the screen into thirds. It's better to be on those sidelines
Yeah.
than straight in the middle.
That's pretty much it. And honestly, I don't know much about the psychology of it either. I've read a couple of things that are interesting about that. Like, why does the human brain like things to be to the side and not in the center? And I don't know if any of that is true. But I do know that it is more pleasing. and time has withstood that. You know, like we know that it's more pleasing. Your natural tendency, just like every student on earth who's trying to shoot video for the first time, your natural tendency, if you were filming me talking, would be to frame me up right in the middle. That's just natural. Some people do that, and you will see commercials and things on TV that are like that. That's fine. But in general, if you think of, and you've probably seen these guides on your camera before, if you break up the frame into thirds vertically, and then you break it up into thirds horizontally, you're left with 9 mini rectangles that are all 16 by 9. The idea here is that instead of placing a human here, or the most important thing here, you would put primary focal points in this area or this area, or this area or this area. You would find those intersecting third lines, and you would put those things there. So really quickly, I want to show you an example of this. Does anybody know Wes Anderson, the director? The Royal Tenenbaums, give me more. The Life Aquatic, all those brilliant. He's one of my favorite directors, and he's brilliant. He ignores the rule of thirds on purpose. Everything in his movies is perfectly centered, and that's his like artistic aesthetic, and that's awesome. But it's just not mine, and I don't get to copy him. So Ambra Johnson's strategic teaching video, I want to show you sort of why news gatherers have adopted this. I knew that was going to happen. I'll
Just
get
go
it.
back.
So look at how I framed up Ambra for this. Thank you, Natalia. I appreciate it. We can probably get it. Let's forget about this thing. It was just down here from earlier. I was like, yeah, I could use that. Notice how I framed up Ambra in this frame. And there are lots of frames inside the frame, which is conceptual. Notice where her eyes and mouth are. They are approximately at that intersecting third line. What this has done for me, not only is it more pleasing for humans to watch, and I don't really know why, but it is, but it also gives me space to use all kinds of titles.
Ambra Johnson. I'm a teacher at Liberty Middle School, and I teach 8th grade language.
If Ambra was framed up in the middle, where in the world would I put all this awesome little text stuff that I'm going to bring in? So that's kind of one of the reasons that the news does this rule of thirds thing, because they know that they're going to need to bring in text, and they know like on a nighttime show when somebody's talking, there's plenty of space here to put graphics and stuff. So that's another benefit of kind of obeying the rule of thirds. Yeah, cool stuff, right? So that's the rule of thirds. Any questions about the rule of thirds? I don't know much more about the rule of thirds. If I were a painter, I would know a lot more. It's an art concept before it was a video concept. People have been playing with the rule of thirds. Da Vinci was a master of the rule of thirds. So this is like the oldest thing in the world of art. I don't know. So anyway, that's the rule of thirds. I would recommend using that. I'm thinking back to like the mid-90s. There was this, do you guys remember, I shouldn't even talk about this, but I'm going to. Do you guys remember a Rolling Stone cover from the 90s with Jennifer Aniston on the cover, and she was nude? Does anybody remember this? This was my foray into the rule of thirds, okay? As an adolescent male. So her bare butt was actually perfectly placed. If you drew grid lines, and we did this in my art class, why I'm bringing it up. If you drew grid lines in this photograph, her butt was in the top right third, and her eye had a little gleam in it. You know, it was glistening, and it was in the lower third. And it was perfectly composed. And you could tell that Rolling Stone, whoever designed their cover, had that in mind and pulled up the grid lines because, I mean, it was like mathematically perfect. So something to think about. It's the oldest thing in the book. And there's no rules about when to use it and when not to use it. It's just something to keep in your head as you're composing your shot, you know. Cool. Last category on here, sound. There are two instances that you might encounter. One is you're shooting with an iPhone or a camcorder and you've got no external mic, which is almost all of you right now. There's a built-in mic on this phone, right? There's a built-in mic on our camcorders. The ones that I hope to get you guys will have a built-in mic. So in those cases, how can we make that audio as good as possible? Because it's not going to sound all that great unless you really think about it and plan for it.
Eliminate as many distractions as possible.
Absolutely. Turn off the air conditioner. So many of your classrooms are so loud. You know, like Liberty's ACs are insanely loud. I just know that because I taught there, but I also know because when I went to shoot Jane Haithcock in her classroom, we had to turn her AC off. It was just too much. So there's that. There's making kids get out of the room. You know, all that, control your environment. But there's more. And I think we talked about it once before. What else can we do? If I'm filming Dixie from here, and she's speaking in her normal speaking voice, assuming we don't have an external mic, but yeah, that's what I would go to every time. Get closer. It's the only thing we can do. We have to get this microphone as close to her mouth as we humanly can without messing up the artistic integrity of the video. So also, you know, if I'm shooting Dixie from here, it's probably not going to look all that great anyway. Why do I need everything else, you know? So I would get as close as possible, probably something like this. And if I'm within 5 to 6 feet, the audio is going to be decent, assuming that I've controlled my environment. So that's, and I noticed in your video, your audio is really good. What did you shoot with? You shot with it's not an iPhone, is it?
It's not.
The audio is better on, is it an Android device?
It is an Android device.
The audio quality was 3 times as good as my iPhone. I don't know why, but I noticed. Yeah. And you were pretty close to your subjects, right? Like from here to
Just about here.
about like that. That's reasonable, especially considering that his mic is better than mine. Now I'm jealous. So yeah, that's what you're going to have to do. And I mean, I could still hear the birds chirping, which was actually really pleasant. And I could hear the wind noise a little bit, which is another hassle. But I could really hear what they were saying, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
Now we need to see his video.
Done.
Is that okay?
I guess so now.
I was thinking the same thing.
Unless he's just totally opposed to it.
Are you totally opposed, Mr. Mathis?
I'm not totally opposed, just
You're just semi-opposed.
If I can find it. One second. Oh, it looks like Mr. Merritt emailed me one today, too. The Art of Friendship.
okay.
Deadbeat, bonfire, red clouds and nightmares and twinkling.
Okay, so friendship to me
Is that your daughter?
probably like, you know, sometimes you're like people at school, you like see them and you say hi in the hallway, but you don't really know them. And so you could like go into a class and have class with them, and you could like make a conversation, but you don't really like know anything about them or anything. That's not friendship. That's like, but friendship is like, what's an example here? Like, if you were to go and see that person in the hallway, and you're like, hey, and you made time out of your day to go out and speak to them, and like, hey, what's wrong? I mean, not what's wrong, but like, what's up? How's life going? And then if you went into that class, you have a class with them, you have like, party time, and be real fun. I think that is friendship. What's friendship to you, Hannah?
Okay, well, I think lots of times you can be with people and you don't really feel a connection with them. Like you still feel like you're yourself, they're them. You just having a conversation, but then there's
there's some people that you don't really feel alone with, like you're a part of their life, and it means something to take time out of your day to talk to them. I didn't know Mary Grace that well until this year, and I feel like I didn't really get to know her that well until second semester of last year. And I think it was working together in English class, actually, that brought us together, because we had to cooperate.
Notice how good the audio is to have been a phone?
And combine our ideas, and then
An
we
Android.
started to see how we were more alike and how we were different.
That's an amazing shot.
It was really great the way we found that our ideas were not completely the same. But they worked together, you know?
So if my life was without Hannah, okay, so in 7th grade when I didn't know her, I had a horrible music taste. I was boy crazy and kind of disgusting. So then I met him in like second semester of 8th grade, and she showed me all her music and stuff, and now it's literally the love of my life, and I don't know how I would get through my life without that music. And I guess I kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of crazy in 7th grade and like tried to be crazy in 8th grade, but I didn't really have the same kind of friend group that did that, so I was just kind of by myself. And so, forgot where I was going. So, yeah, I think she kind of slowed me down and like, oh God. And I don't know. So my life would be really kind of hectic and stressful without her in it, probably.
Yeah, let's give Stephen a round of applause. Good job, Stephen. So good.
I loved it.
Also, that was Lisa's child.
You could still hear their voices, but yet sometimes you would transition to a still picture.
That was my favorite thing about the production of his video.
Yeah.
Yep. How did you do that?
Took a lot of pictures first.
Yeah.
And then we this wasn't our first idea. We had 3 different ideas, and then I saw them walking, and I was like, I'm gonna switch everything up. And so the questions were all on the fly. We went to ended up at the park, and I wanted to find a spot where the trees were actually shedding the leaves at the time. Just going for that little look. And so we found a spot, and I just got them talking naturally about friendship, and they went with the whole thing. And then once I got back home, I took all the stuff from the camera and my phone, and I downloaded it, and then I put it on this thing, and then I just started piecing everything together, and it took a lot of figuring out what goes on top, what needs to go on the bottom, but once we figured it out, it was just a matter of choosing the pictures, and then finding out, I had to find out like the good spots of where to place the pictures when they would talk, and that took the most time, trying to make sure that you found the right picture for what they were saying. But just placing everything on top and finding the music, placing that on the bottom, and knowing that level of the music, that really helps a lot.
Yeah. It's a really tasteful audio mix. Like, I can feel the music contributes to the vibe of the film, but it doesn't interact at all with the voice. It's not distracting from the voice. It's just the right level. There's a sweet spot. As for the photos, like you said, just placing them on top of the video clip, there's no cutting involved. You just take the photo, you pull it in, you put it on top of the video, and then that shows, but the audio still comes through. So whatever's on top shows on top. And so that's how you do that with photos. Really tastefully done. Yeah.
I have a 20-minute photo thing that I have set up.
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
copyright. So I had to go, it took me about an hour to go through those websites and find a song. And once I did, I had to, I tried to download it. I did download it. It would not show up on iTunes. So I ended up having to actually purchase the song on iTunes, and then it showed up, and that's how I got in there. I didn't want to waste time trying to figure that out. That was the last part of the video, so I wanted to just be done with it at that time.
So I would write this down, this one right here, Jamendo.com. This is a Creative Commons website, and its sole purpose is to provide royalty-free music to people like you, and you can filter by mood, you can filter by style. There's lots of filters you can apply, and a lot of it's junk, but you'll find something in there. So if you're looking for something that's happy, energetic, and instrumental, you can put those 3 filters on it, and it's going to give you like 30 songs. And you just click through them until you find one. When you find the one you want, you download it. It goes into your downloads folder. Now, my recommendation to you is that you bypass iTunes altogether, if at all possible. So if you can get your music into your downloads folder on your Mac, then all you have to do is import media, just like it was a camera footage. So I'm going to right-click here in my event space, hit import media, and then when this comes up, I'm sorry, there are two options. One is I can click this down arrow right here. That's going to allow me to import media. Alternatively, I can right-click or two-finger click right here in this gray space of the event and choose import media. Now if I just navigate to my downloads folder, whatever I just downloaded from the web is going to be right there. And I pull it in just like it was a picture or a video clip. That way you're not getting iTunes mixed up in the process, and it's just an MP3 file from the internet. You pull it directly into Final Cut. So I'll show you how I would do that. If I grab, assuming I have an MP3 here, which I don't know if I do, but yeah, when I import it, once I click import, it's going to show up here as a green block. Like here's Red Velvet Short. It's going to show up just like this. And I would take that and pull it down here and place it under my video. Or above the video. I mean, as we've said, you can technically put it anywhere because it's going to play. With audio, there is no difference. With audio, above or below is a personal preference to help you stay organized in your brain. You know, if you think of audio as like a blanket or like the foundation, as I do sort of, you might tend to put it on the bottom. But not always. You know, you might choose to put it on top. Either way, it's going to play. Yeah.
I used to jump on that website that you were talking about, and it's royalty free, but it doesn't appear to be free. Am I doing something wrong? These all have buy buttons.
Let's see. So if I go here, this looks different than it used to look.
They've changed some things, and there are a lot more of them that you have to purchase now. But if you go to Discover and do your search there,
She's not seeing Discover. That's weird. Can you help her through that?
when you go to Jamendo, there are 3 buttons, and I think one says commercial use, one says upload, one says listen. You need to click on listen. That's probably what happened.
The only thing that Jamendo asks that you do is that you give the artist and the song title credit somewhere in your video. Like you put it in the end credits, or you could say you have been listening to and put the song name and the artist. That's all that Creative Commons requires. It's free stuff, but the artist still is asking for recognition. I doubt it would ever be a thing, but I would do that just in case. So, the other thing, let's switch back to audio for a second. If you have an external mic, then that changes the game. External mics are fantastic. The camcorders that I'm hoping to get for you guys have a mic input, but it's only a single mic. So you have to kind of negotiate, like, okay, if it's me and Miss King sitting together and we're talking to each other and it's conversation, and all I have is this wireless lapel mic like I'm wearing right now, who gets the mic? You know what I mean? Because like I'll be 3 times louder than she'll be if I've got the mic. The mic will pick her up a little bit. So then you're limited creatively. Well, I can only shoot one person talking at a time. At least that's an upgrade. At least the audio quality is good. And for the most part, you're rarely going to shoot more than one person at one time. In the situation where you have 3 people standing in a group and you want them all to be heard equally, it would be really cool if you could get a shotgun mic. And we can talk about that in the future. If you look on top of that camera back there, you see that thing sticking out the top of it? That is a shotgun mic. And you've seen those for reality TV. It's like a boom pole, and they're holding it in the face of the people that they're filming. Those are shotgun mics. Those are amazing. And if you ever have a need for that, you can borrow mine, or we can work to buy you one for your school somehow. Yeah.
Those people that have not done national boards and you have to film, that is, the microphone is the most important thing that you try and test before you actually, because you can't, well, when I did it, you can't cut. You could only do threading involved.
Yeah.
It's straight through, and so the mic is, you gotta have the mic.
Exactly. That's why if you're going for national boards, I recommend shooting me an email a week or two before, and we'll just set up to where we'll bring in professional stuff and we'll send a student intern or me, and we'll shoot it for you. That's what you're going to want. Yeah, the audio is a big deal. Yeah, Missy.
Do you recommend a certain brand of shotgun mic?
Yeah. If I were you, I would get Rode, R-O-D-E. It's an Australian company that makes low-budget mics, and they're fantastic. So R-O-D-E. They also have a wireless lapel kit that's made by Rode. Both are great. The wireless lapel kits are $350 to $400. The shotgun mics are more in the $100 range. So like that's something you might want to consider getting. There is one last device I want to tell you about. Let's say I wanted to shoot with my iPhone, which many of you will choose to do most of the time, but I want to bring any other microphone into my iPhone and override the built-in mic of my phone. This is something that's really cool and really possible, and it's cheap. I'm going to show you this device, and I'll show you what it does. It is called the Tascam IXZ, and you can get it at Guitar Center in Huntsville, or you can order it on Amazon. It's really cheap. In this case, let's see how much it is. It's $50. This thing right here, you can see, yeah, I got it. Here we go. This plug right here goes into your headphone jack of your iPhone or iPad. Then it breaks it out into a microphone input that's universal for any microphone in the world. Or you could put a guitar or a keyboard or something into that also. So for $50, you've got a breakout cable for your iPhone. This is really cool. I don't know if it works with Android devices, but I bet it does. I don't know. We'd have to look into it. But what this, imagine like, say you went to the auditorium at your school or wherever and you stole one of those handheld mics like they use in faculty meetings, right? You could take that and plug it directly into your iPhone and shoot with your camera, and students or you could be going around interviewing people like this, and you're going to get perfect, pristine audio into your iPhone. Or you could plug in a lapel mic like this into your iPhone as well. So this is something that you might want to consider getting. Plugs into the headphone jack. That's because modern headphone jacks on the iPhone now have, it's a two-way street. It's sending left and right out to headphones, but it's also got one input for a microphone. You know those, you know, I don't know, but I bet it does. Did that come with earbuds? If those earbuds have a microphone built into them, then you can do it. Yeah. Here's how you know. Here's how you know. This thing has 3 rings. The tip of this has 3 rings. If there are 3 rings, it means you can do it. If there are only 2, it means it's one way only. It's left and right headphones or whatever. So that 3rd ring is the microphone return. That's what that is. So that's a really cool device. We have one of those at James Clemens. We've used it many times. It works great. Runs on AA batteries. You get like 100 hours out of 2 AA batteries. I really, really recommend them. Okay, that's all I've got like for as far as this stuff goes. Missy.